Everyone, it's Emily Fox. Today's video is going to be all about classics, specifically all the classics that I've read during my time on Booktube. I have just under 20. To be honest, I thought there would be more, but I took a break for a while because I kind of got a little sick of them because I did a minor in French literature. So I took a little bit of a break, but I'm now fully back with the book club on Patreon. We're reading one big classic every 2 months. Currently, we're reading the Three Musketeers. If you're interested, I'll link everything down below. But we're continuing next year, and I thought it would be fun to do a top 5 of the ones that I've read on Booktube and then do a quick review of all the other ones. So hopefully you find some new recommendations, new favorites in here. But yes, top 5. Ooh, and definitely leave me your recommendations in the comment section. Let's start with the obvious because it needs to be mentioned, but Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Listen, it's a classic for a reason. A classic. And I grew up watching the BBC adaptation, so I'm really emotionally attached to this book, love story, classic romance, and I'm obsessed. I did read a physical copy. I've also listened to the audiobook. There's a million version, and I love it. I feel like a lot of people don't realize how funny Jane Austen is, and I feel like this one is one of the best example of it. Her family is just so ridiculous, and I've watched so many adaptations. Actually, I did a video where I compared and chose my favorite actor compared to all the different adaptations that I've watched. So if you're interested, people got very intense in the comment section. But yes, absolutely love it. Obviously, romance between Darcy and Elizabeth. I feel like everyone knows about this, so I'm not going to go into much more detail, but highly recommend if you haven't picked it up. It's definitely worth it. I feel like the BBC adaptation is pretty much word for word, so if you've seen that, you will most likely enjoy this too. And because we're talking about Jane Austen, I also have to mention Emma. I really enjoy this. I was not prepared. I feel like I knew I was really attached to Pride and Prejudice, so of course it was going to be 5 stars for me. But I didn't know if I was going to feel the same about the rest of her work, and I love Emma so much. I also watched 2 movies of it. But once again, I really enjoy her writing. Honestly, I wish I could speak the way these characters speak. But I still really enjoyed her strong female characters. I think this is her strength. The strong female characters and her relationship between sisters, not in this one, but in Pride and Prejudice. And this one is no different. Really enjoy the main character. She gave me secondhand embarrassment. I do get it pretty easily, but oh my gosh, this was a tough read at time. But I once again was really enjoying the romance, which is what makes the difference between these two compared to the rest of the work by her that I've read. But yes, absolutely recommend this. Again, I do feel like this one is quite popular. Next, I obviously need to mention Le Comte de Monte Cristo, which my edition is in 2 books because it's the unabridged version. It's just ridiculously long. We're not gonna talk about the 3 years that happened between me reading number 1 and number 2. Let's avoid the topic, no comments. But book 1, I really liked it. The first like 300-400 pages, could not put it down. Super invested. The main character is such a good person that gets falsely accused and put in prison because his friend basically wants the girl that he loves. And I feel like this portion was also pretty close to the movie. I grew up watching the movie. I can't help comparing books and adaptations, but afterwards it gets very different. It does slow down after that for the end of the first part. I mean, authors were paid per word. It does show, it does, but eventually things pick up in part 2 and things get, once again, very interesting, but very different from the movie. It gets a bit weird. I swear, I feel like I never hear anyone mention how weird the ending is. It's definitely an epic revenge story, very popular for a reason. I agree with the hype, but the ending is really strange, and maybe deep down I'm a big romantic and I feel like I prefer the ending of the movie. Is it unpopular? I feel like the revenge is really well executed in here, but the movie did it pretty good too. Also a big plus, I love to mention it because you know how people are like, oh, you know, of course these authors were racist or sexist or homophobic because that was normal at the time. There's a positive representation of a lesbian couple. So I'm just gonna say it. I think it's funny because I googled it and then some people are like fighting and saying that no, it's absolutely not true. This girl that dresses up like a man runs away with her music teacher and they're found sharing a bed. That's gay. That's very gay. It's not a spoiler. It's very much of a side character story, but I still wanted to mention it because, hey, you'll take whatever you can get. And yes, absolutely worth the hype. Loved it. Am I cheating if I'm including a modern classic? I decided to let that one sneak in. We're going to allow it. East of Eden. Yes, absolutely worth the hype. I was terrified of this book. It is very chunky and it's like a heavy one too. I had read the first chapter when I wasn't sure what to read and it felt really slow, but by chapter 2 things pick up. So don't be scared of it. It's very, very readable. I only knew that it was kind of a retelling of the Bible between the brother Abel and Cain, but I fell in love with some of the side characters. And I really, really liked the way the author writes complex and interesting relationships between brothers and like also their fathers, and super well executed. It's very character driven, so there's not much of a story to really tell you about. All I want to tell you is that it's absolutely worth reading, worth the hype. The writing is beautiful. The story was really complex and interesting. There's only one section that made me kind of cringe, which in my edition is at page 357. There's a scene about Lee's mother. We're going to keep this spoiler free. I was questioning my sanity actually when I read that part. Like, why is that there? Otherwise, I really like Lee as a character. Actually really loved him. And the ending of Katie's story is the only thing that made me a bit unsure how I felt about it. But otherwise, I think this is a fantastic book and absolutely worth the hype. 5 stars. Then the last book in my top 5. I wanted to try all of the Bronte sisters, all 3 of them. And I tried one book per sister, trying to figure out which one is going to be my favorite one. I'm planning on reading all of their work, but you know, had to start somewhere. And turns out that it might be an unpopular opinion, but I think Anne Bronte is the one that works the most for me. I have it in 2 edition. This one also contains Agnes Grey, which I will be reading soon, hopefully. But I absolutely love this. I had heard that it was quite feminist, and yeah, I understand why it was so controversial. It starts with this woman showing up in this new neighborhood with only her son. So just her. You don't really know what happens. Is she a widow? And you have this man that basically falls in love with her and is pursuing her, and she eventually, you know, you find out what happened to her. And the author doesn't go easy on husbands. How awful they were. So I understand why, again, it wasn't necessarily super well received. And I believe I had read that when she passed away really young, her sister didn't get this book like republished because of the controversy. But I'm so happy we get to read it now because this is absolutely amazing. I absolutely loved it. Very progressive for the time. My only complaint, I feel like I'm always mentioning the one thing, but I feel like it's easier to mention what makes you a bit iffy about a book compared to just raving about, I love the writing, it's so vague, is the ending. But I'm fully aware that I'm seeing it from a 2022 lens, 100%. So I wanted more, but I really like the female character. I really like, again, how she called out so many people in this book. So if you're looking for a new classic, I highly recommend this one. I feel like between all the other ones in my top 5, this is definitely the least popular one, least read one, and I'm here to tell you that it's absolutely worth the read. So we might as well continue with the Bronte sisters. Let's talk about all of them. I did read Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights, and disclaimer, I think that my mindset when I went into them was the biggest part of the problem here, is that I had heard that both of these were romances, and I am questioning everyone's need for therapy. Why? No. Jane Eyre. Love Jane as a character. Once again, a really strong, interesting female character, quite feminist, quite progressive for the time. Absolutely hated Mr. Rochester. Why is anyone finding this romantic? I had heard people say and compare this to Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth in Pride and Prejudice. What? Why? No. Did you forget the whole attic thing? Again, I'm keeping this video spoiler free, but you know what I'm referring to. How is that? No. So yes, love the beginning because you get Jane's childhood. Hated the romance. Hated it. So that kind of ruined the book a little bit for me. I still gave it like 4 stars. It's not a bad book at all, but I hate the romance, and I will proudly and loudly say it. No. Mr. Rochester just sucks. No. And then Wuthering Heights. Okay. Whoever said that this was a romance, I mean, maybe if you mention that it's 2 horrible people treating each other horribly, fine. But like, I would never call this a romance when I describe this book. So that was the problem. I went into it was waiting for me to root for someone, and I wasn't. But I highly recommend it for the setting. You could see the gothic feels, and absolutely, the writing was beautiful, the setting was gorgeous, but it's relationship between two horrible people treating each other horribly. For that, I did enjoy it, but mentally I wasn't prepared for whatever I read. So yes, do recommend it, but not a favorite because of very specific circumstances. Before I forget, I don't know where my edition of Crime and Punishment is. I found it. Here it is. Which it's because my life is chaotic. I just finished my library, almost. So I will be moving my books any day now. So this is probably the last video, at least that I'm recording in this setting. So very excited because I can't stand these anymore. But Crime and Punishment. I wanted to give it a quick shout out. I did not finish it. Putting it out there. This was my first full-size novel, Russian novel, and it bested me. I couldn't do it. I do like the idea of the whole like mental anguish that the characters go through in a lot of Russian classics, or at least so I've heard. But this one just drove me crazy because I really struggled to just care for the male character because he really sucked. Like really, like goes ahead and kills someone to, because he thinks that he can, because he's morally superior. Like, does he just want to feel something? I have read the Spark Notes. I know what this is meant to be about, but I just couldn't force myself to read it. I even attempted to listen to it as an audiobook and I couldn't finish the book. So I just wanted to put it out there that I tried. Not for me, but it's quite popular. It does work for some people, but just really not for me. Which brings me to the second book that I can't find that is also a Russian classic. Maybe it's a sign they're hiding from me. But The Death of Yvonne Ilitch, I think. This was really good. Again, mental anguish, Russian classic. I think maybe Leo Tolstoy in general might be something that, an author that works for me better. I need to read more by him. I do have some of his novels on my shelf, so maybe next year, maybe we could pick up Anna Karenina together. Maybe it would motivate me because I'm terrified of that book. It's chunky. But in this one, you have a main character who, it's like a slow death. But it seems to be very much in his head in the beginning, but he's slowly dying, so you're just following him like that. And I really enjoyed it. I do think that the fact that it was like 100 and something pages helped me enjoy it a lot more than Crime and Punishment. But yes, would recommend this one if you're wanting to get into Russian classics and you're terrified of them like I was. So you know what? Let's go through all of the Jane Austen that I have read but haven't mentioned yet. The only one I haven't read that is a full-size novel by her is Mansfield Park. Again, might pick up that next year if you guys are interested. Let's start with Lady Susan. Let's talk about another short one. I did enjoy this one. This one is written in like letter format, like just correspondence between some characters. I liked it just fine. It's a quick read anyway. I do recommend the movie, which I believe is called Love and Friendships, which the intro, super funny. I feel like it makes it very clear that her books are meant to be funny. But yes, it's fine. It's not my favorite by her, but it's also not my least favorite. And I very recently, last month, finished Sense and Sensibility by her. And I read the physical copy for the first half and then I switched to the audiobook because things ended up slowing down quite a bit. In the beginning, I thought this was going to be another 5 stars by her. I overall, once again, enjoyed her writing. I enjoyed the relationship between the two sisters, Eleanor and Marianne. I think that was well written, but my problem is that I really wasn't shipping the two relationships that the sisters had. First off, Eleanor, I'm going to keep this vague, again, spoilers, but I felt like her relationship came out of nowhere. Absolutely out of nowhere. I did watch the movie and TV show also to compare them, and I feel like the movie made me ship them a lot more than the book, so you might want to check that out if you feel the same. But also Marianne, I felt like, I mean, any of the silliness you could accuse her of, she's 17. Like, once you remember that, I feel like it excuses quite a bit. But I also wasn't really shipping her with whoever she ended up with. I feel like he should have ended up with Eleanor. I feel like they would have been a better couple, but it's fine. Also, my favorite character, hands down, Colin and Brendan. Love him. Love him. The two that are left are my least favorite books by her. I really didn't care for either of them. Northanger Abbey, this one has 2 parts and they just feel very disjointed and a completely different story in my opinion. The main character is definitely more meek and like people walk all over her in the beginning and, you know, she will become stronger, which I found harder to root for her than with her other main characters. But mainly I wasn't super invested in part 1, and then part 2 was definitely more interesting. Again, gothic feels. It was just so different from part 1 that I wasn't super invested. It's also one of her shorter ones, so it was fine, just not a favorite. And Persuasion, I was pretty confused as to why people ship the two characters so hard together until I watched the movie, which once again, I felt like made things a lot clearer. I do have the love declaration. I feel like she's so good at that. I agree, that part was cute. But once again, I just really wasn't that invested in it. So it is what it is. I expected Jane Austen to be like an all-time favorite author, and I'm realizing that I'm very, very specific with what I like by her. But I will still be reading Mansfield Park. I haven't read that many French classics, I feel like, on Booktube, but recently I made the squirrel that I've been feeding throughout the pandemic choose whatever I was going to read, and she chose Le Dernier Jour d'un Condamné by Victor Hugo, so the last day of a condemned man. And like the title suggests, you're following a man the last couple of days before he dies, including the last day that he's alive before he's publicly executed, and it's basically about the author being against public executions, which was kind of scandalous at the time. He even included in my edition like a little comedy where people make fun of him for writing this book. I guess it was as a reaction to the backlash that he got. You never find out what he did. It's kind of implied that he probably killed a man, but that's basically it. And also, it's hard to feel bad for him because of the way he treats his female relatives. So basically what he says about his mother, wife, and daughter. But frankly, the main moral of the story that I got, the main message I got, was how embarrassing it must be to be publicly executed. Can you imagine? Like, I know it's not really the take to really get from this, but I can't stop thinking about how embarrassing it would be to be killed in front of everyone. I would be so embarrassed. So yeah, that's my strong opinion on this one. The next French play I read was Don Juan by Molière, which I feel like nowadays we forget how horrible of a person he was. I feel like nowadays it lost its negative connotation to be called, you know, Don Juan, but the book definitely makes it very clear. Also in both of these, the authors are very harsh with people that don't speak proper French. In this one specifically, the author seems to really make fun of the poor people that basically sound pretty Québécois, which I'm taking that personally. And last but not least, the ending is incredibly weird. Incredibly weird. I feel like I've never heard anyone mention it. I get that it's like a whole like, oh, you know, he had it coming kind of religious undertone or straight up tone really, but strange. It was fine. It was fine. I also read Rebecca, which I got rid of it because my edition was really ugly, and I didn't love it. In popular opinion, I really was looking forward to reading a classic gothic murder mystery, but I really wasn't invested. I was kind of just mad about the whole thing, to be honest. It wasn't for me, so I ended up getting rid of my copy. My edition was really ugly, so it is what it is. And also, before I forget, Frankenstein, which again, in the popular opinion, I didn't really care for it. It was fine. Like, I read it basically just to read it or just finish it, so don't really have much of an opinion on it. Do you consider this one a modern classic, or is it just a classic? Where do you put the line? Because I'm going to include it, might as well, but The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, all I have to say is that this is basically the opposite from the movie. So it's kind of strange to read, but it's very quick, so it was fine. Ooh, I almost forgot The Picture of Dorian Gray, another really big classic to read, another LGBTQ plus friendly read also. That was a controversy at the time also. I overall enjoyed it. There's just that one chapter that has like the description of everything that he enjoys that is pretty boring, but otherwise it was also fine, just not a favorite. So these were the best classics that I've read on Booktube, and a quick review of everything else. I feel like overall it was pretty successful. I'm happy with the ones I've read. A few disappointments, but I'm realizing that now my expectations need to be, I need to not listen to people really, because everyone's taste for romance differs from mine. Let me know in the comment section your favorite classics that you've read. I'm definitely looking forward to reading some more consistently, and I will see you in a coming video very soon. Bye.